Good morning, everyone. So I'm Katya Taylor. I was invited to talk about the solidarity of artists, but I'm not an artist, actually. And I thought that maybe from the point of view of solidarity, if I will keep silent, it would be good. But if I am invited as a speaker, so I thought it would be good to talk on behalf of the artists. And so what happened here, I had a talk with several people and I understood that it's not enough. Then I was inspired by this big 90 pages document which was mentioned by Simon, and I understood that it's impossible for me to research it over 5 days. But still, what I can do the mini research. I can talk with some SMEs, with my colleagues, because I can work with them, but I do not know anything about them, because sometimes I do not know what's inside of their minds, because sometimes we are really pressed with tasks, with projects. So basically we talk about only some things we do, but I just understood that I stopped asking our artists, how do they feel, right? To ask those whom I see every day at work, and it was kind of concerning. Yeah, I am always anxious during these times, but it added some anxiety to that, because it looks like we ignore the war, and that's one of the topics I would like to talk over. So yeah, we can talk it out while having the discussion, but I would like to start with some short takeaways that I managed to extract from these questionnaires. And could you please switch on my presentation? So what I can say, so I made a mini research with basic questions about how do we feel, especially in the artist environment. So there were 50 people, and we cannot say that that was the super representative samples, but campus, yeah, but we have the understanding of what these 30 authors, how do they feel, what do they want. Yeah, whom I managed to ask those people who are both in Ukraine and abroad. So basically these were artists, but also there were other culture workers, basically those who are part of the visual art projects. So mainly these are female. They are very often in filling up in different questionnaires. Some people didn't indicate their gender and their names. So what we were talking about, we discussed the needs of the community. So there were now the needs from like 6 months ago. No, these were current pressing needs. So that's something really topical. Yeah, people are underfunded. They are looking for money. They are looking for residencies, short-term residencies, because people want to live their life. They cannot just receive wonderful opportunity and go to London or New York or any other Finnish village for half a year to stay there. Yeah, unfortunately, there are limited conditions, especially taking into account the context in the country which was before the residencies. And for me, it was interesting that there was a good demand for the exhibitions. Is something that happens very frequently. Very often it's like not profitable, but still artists, they feel the need for this representation. So what they feel is that the majority of people very often face the red tape process and problems. They do not understand how to write grants. Yeah, they feel this opportunity, but they do not understand how to do it in practice. And it's like pretty challenging to get there. Sometimes people just do not have time to fill out the grants because they have the current projects. Yes, some men have some restrictions, they cannot go abroad.
A lot of people that responded, they mentioned there were 10 questions, and one of those, they always mentioned the emotional fatigue. And it's important to stop here because we are living ignoring that because we are partially adapted among two points. It's about feeling fatigue, emotional fatigue, not physical fatigue. This is burnout. A lot of people feel isolation, and a few answers mentioned that people were writing. They were saying that they are among the people all the time, but still they feel lonely. And this is kind of a starting point. This is isolation, loneliness, and emotional fatigue. And in between, there are a lot of other things. There are exhibitions, communication projects, discussions, opportunities, and so on. And there is another point, which is uncertainty. Whatever we are doing, we have to balance in between these two extreme points, two extreme conditions. Then on the one hand, we are feeling tired. On the other hand, we feel uncertain. What else can we mention here? So this is the lack of systemic support. This is something that has been highlighted for multiple times. We managed to do great projects, but it's very difficult to build stable systems in the conditions of uncertainty. This is not an issue that has been further exacerbated. And what's interesting, there are a lot of people that, again, those who took part in the survey, they were already active and they spent their time being active. But among the questions whether you are still active in what you are usually doing, they said yes, they are simply active or super active. So they wanted to be involved in projects. So among those who filled in the survey, this was a community abroad, which is especially active. There were a few quotations that I wanted to include in the presentation. So the voice of the art person is very important, or the voice of the culture representative. So first of all, here we talk about funds. This is a topic that has been raised. So more funds, as we can see here about the music. So there were 2 or 3 persons who decided to fill in the survey. That's why I decided to include it. But again, no structure, no support. It's some things that were mentioned. But in general, if we are talking about those who are in Ukraine, the artist mentioned that they faced, first of all, the bureaucracy. I would like to quote Roman Mikhailov. I didn't manage to get his responses here, but in the morning he said them separately, some of his comments and ideas regarding, I can see the new generations who are growing post-graffiti. I can see the environment growing from out of the musical scene, something that came up after 2014, but I cannot see the development of the forgotten generation that is now getting back to its senses after the COVID times. I think it's an important comment because for people who were aged 18, it was back in 2020, and in 5 years, they were able to graduate from university, but if they graduated in 2020, they didn't have opportunity to interact, not only have online communication, but fully integrate and socialize and maybe create their own community, because 5 years, that's a long period of time. And if they didn't have time to integrate on time, they're experiencing difficulties now. What was interesting? Some other insights. So there is the feeling of the double reality, this having different experiences, and we will talk about it a bit later, that on the one hand there is communication among us, but it's more about being formal rather than real. So again, it's about communication between separate people or institutions, but can we actually call this a community? There were a few topics that we discussed with them. We already covered about the funding issue. So these two comments were interesting to be included here because a lot of artists do not rely on anyone. And even though they have limited resources, they still keep helping others by organizing their own residencies, by helping young artists and involving them in different projects. So very few count on the state. It's not bad or good. It's just a fact that was indicated by many people. First of all, they talked, when it comes to challenges, they talked about the lack of funding and also the inability to deal with bureaucracy. Again, it means that there is difficulty in cooperation between the artist and the agent or manager who could help them potentially. So these are two different communities that do not always interact effectively. And the majority responded that, I don't know how to apply for the grant. I don't know who I should address. I don't know how to fill out an application form and so on. So once again, it means that it's not like about the grants being inaccessible. However, under these conditions, we have this prolonged crisis. It's very difficult to concentrate on additional things apart from your professional activities and basically discover new things, how to, for example, to apply for a grant and so on. So this is perceived as something that is complicated right now in general. So again, people mentioning insecurity, difficult to find support. There were a lot of comments like that. Some mentioned about the grant separately. It's about what artists wanted from grants. For them, they want not to have terrible financial reports. So again, it's about mobility between what I'm doing. And if I want to create something else, I don't want to be limited by the grant. I want to have freedom of creativity. And we know it's complicated because if you apply for a grant, we need some preciseness. And if there is a change, it has to be minimal. And it's difficult to combine with the creativity freedom. And secondly, another issue that comes up very often, artists are not able to get the grant for their activities. They can get a grant for a project that has some tangible results or deliverables, but it's difficult to get such funds, which is called like institutional support, because it's easier to support a separate artist. But on the other hand, it's difficult to assess the activities of the artist. You can only have whether there was activity or the activity did not take place. If it's a conceptual work, or if we have an artist that deals with something that there is no material composition as a result, then we have a lot of complications here. Also, a lot of respondents, about 1/3, mentioned that the most important is actually exchange of experience in its most general sense. So it's not about getting to international markets. It's not about like getting some tangible results, but still it's about interaction, cooperation, communication, and whether they have an opportunity to talk with someone whose experience is different from your own. Again, bureaucracy was another mentioned issue that the artists were mentioning, but it's not only a problem of that artists are facing, but if we talk about colleagues working and living abroad, there is this misunderstanding how to pay taxes here or there. how to do it in a legal way. Sometimes it's even difficult to find out things within one country, but it's even more complicated when you are live in two countries. A lot of people indicated that it was easier for them to work abroad and apply for grants abroad. There are a few comments that I had never received support in Ukraine, but I did so abroad. So once again, it's a nice idea to research why is it happening so, but just this is an important comment. And of course, we can see the first response here when it comes to age limitations, when the artist cannot go abroad. There are other limitations when they're living in another country, or there can be issue with taxes, or the contracts are not understandable, because you have to be a kind of legal expert, because if you move abroad, sometimes you have to solve these issues. But in general, this is like just the lack of understanding how to work with institutions abroad, because they have their own rules. There is a long-term planning which is absent in Ukraine. That's why it's difficult to agree to negotiate a project that will happen in 2 years. For an institution, this is acceptable and okay. We can already start planning our activities according to the rules of the Western market. When we negotiate and agree on the exhibition 2 years in advance. But for an individual artist, it poses some challenges, because if they are in a different country, they don't know where they're going to live in 2 years. Also, I also mentioned at the beginning, this is engagement. So there are either active people or very active or very engaged people. This is really inspiring. We can see that the population is engaged abroad. What would they want to be involved in? So what were the most popular word combinations or topics? So as we can see it on the screen, this is environmental art, this is bodily feelings, memory and trauma. These were like topics at the crossroads of different other topics, or when it was interesting for artists to research how these different topics cross among themselves, and not when they are eliminated from each other. And this is everything basically from my side. This is a very short research, but if you want to be involved, it's still open, and we would like to collect more data, both from artists and also from cultural activists. So please get involved. We will get it updated with your data, and I'm really grateful for your attention. And I would like to invite, to give the floor to Olha Sahaidak, Borys Filonenko. Just please get yourself comfortably. So today we have to talk about solidarity of artists, the perspectives and initiatives. This is how our panel is called. I don't know whether we will manage it and whether we will keep within the limits of this topic, within the frameworks of this topic, because there are a lot of things that we would like to mention. And if to talk, if to go beyond this framework, we would like to know what's inside. So I would like to start this discussion with the topic of war normalization. And it's understandable that we live in long-term war. We do not see the end of it, but we talk about it rarely. And let's start by what hasn't been spoken yet. If we have a look at the community, we did a good job. So in these 3 years of full-scale invasion, we have managed to achieve a lot. We have fully adapted to the war conditions. Our lives go on, but we rarely talk about it, about the fact that this is, for someone, it's like the same as admitting the war when we normalize it, and it looks like we are at good terms with the war and everything is okay, even though it's not so. So the question is to all participants, can we already start talking about the normalization of war? Can we talk about out loud? And is cultural sphere, this is something that should be circulated within, and do we have the war having some positive impact on our life, if we can even ask this question? So this is a question to all of the panelists. It's a very, what you mentioned is very controversial. And personally, I don't have a feeling that we have accepted the war and that we are normalizing. So it's very difficult to justify that we are accepting the war. So I would actually use some counter arguments, and there will be no acceptance of the war. And these ways of hope that are dragging you back, they are also then you afterwards then you feel the despair and so on. So it's not about accepting the war. I'm getting used to quieter nights. For example, in Lviv, we have less air raid alarms during the night, but for the rest of Ukraine, it's different. Also, I would like to reflect on the presentation. I was really surprised by the fact that the artists, engaged artists, express what I would call infantile needs. We want to be funded, but at the same time, we want to be tolerated. We want our schedules to be tolerated. We don't want to report. We don't want to explain what we are going to create. Maybe there will be something practical, but please, I want it to be funded. So in my opinion, it looks a bit childish. Of course, we have very few funds, we have very few human resources, mental resources, emotional resources. But it seems to me that the artists are also the citizens of Ukraine. A lot of our colleagues are at the front line. Some have been killed in action, and we have to understand that the war creates extreme conditions, and we cannot feel good, actually, and this we cannot expect these good feelings. And I think that this feeling of helplessness, if we do not feel support, this is not something we have experienced, because only we can have to support ourselves, and we have to rely on ourselves. If we expect that someone will help us, we are going to lose, actually. A few days ago, I was at the Honhadze Award presentation, and there was the head of Kyiv Independent. She mentioned that we cannot lower our hands if we are doing something, and this is something that inspired me. And I can this doing that not mentioned, this is our assistance, our support.
I was very attentive listening to you. So yes, I totally agree with Ola. And it's not for the first time during this month when I advocate artists. It looks like we have two types of artists, one hopeless and the other ones are organized and active. So I don't have such problems when I do not understand where do I need to get money, how I have to report about it. And I think that responsibility is distributed between the freedom and the amount of money that you can receive. So I don't have it. As for the way that normalization of the war. So 2014, that was kind of unpredictable horror. How I perceived that back then, that's how I keep moving on. So 2022, it was not a shock for me. A shock was back in 2014. I didn't know whom I have to turn to. Maybe some people right now are feeling this 2014s of mine. I'm not sure. But I don't have this panic and shock right now. So some people have insomnia, some people have problems with memory. That's what I hear from my people around me. So I had insomnia as well, and I watched Robert Sapolsky, who says that stress hampers our memory and our ability to learn. So, and can you feel this detrimental effect of stress? Yeah, we have to learn how to live. We have to tackle the problems, and we are doing great, I would say. So, what does this person say about stress? How people from the How Are You, the state program, people from this program turned to him. So 28 minutes, it's a free forum for you. So it was great support coming from them. They heard me for 27 minutes. So Mr. Roberts said, yes, I can give you some piece of advice if you are from the Silicon Valley and you're failing with your startup, but I do not know what to advise you. So he was frank about that. But he also mentioned that we are the primates, and I've been learning them for 30 years. So if something happens to the primates, if someone diseases, so do you know what they do? They are trying to groom their fur. So that's what he advises. Yes, we have to give hugs, we have to come together, we have to spend time for that. That's what the primates do, those who have grief or who lose some of their family members because of the predators. So yeah, we have the big war and we have the big question about the burnout, about emotional and stability, yes, and we have some disruption of the community. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. So right now we do not do this grooming in the right way. So, and it's not just, to groom people in Ukraine or in Lviv, but also to groom with those who are abroad. So basically you answered all the questions I had in mind about grooming abroad. That's great. Two questions about the normalization of the war and about the artists and about the grants. So I have one clarification about the presentation. So how many artists under 25 were in the target audience? It's the great question. Actually, I didn't ask the age. Maybe I should have done this. I'm just thinking about the outcomes, and from what I understand, I want to mention that half of my audience, they are older. Yeah, I just know their names. I just know these artists, but I still think that, yes, there were younger artists as well. The Roma quotes I remembered, it was the quote about the 23-25 generation. Yeah, about those age 23-25. All right. So that was my clarification. Okay. A normalization of the war. So I can build up a kind of necklace of different arguments and theses. So it all depends on what we consider to be a norm. Yeah, if we look in the retrospective, we can mention that, yeah, sometimes we see it's relatively what is peace. It's just a period. It's not a norm. So therefore, probably having an understanding that we have the war ongoing and it's going to be for a while, and if it is not stopped here in Ukraine, it can continue elsewhere. So therefore, right now we have a question. So what's our relation to the wars that are not on the territory of Ukraine? And I think that those questions have been already talked over and thought over, and I have the feeling that there is a paradigm shift, that the 50 years of peace in Europe is over or is about to be over. So this shift happened in 2023, I mean in the mid of this year. Therefore, I would like to mention that while talking about this normalization, I did not use this term actually, but the very understanding that the war is a total circumstance that touches upon everyone in different aspects. So that's something what I can agree with. But still we have another question. So what's the timeline you or we or everyone is living in? So I read different materials and I understand that in the EU they feel the war in the EU, and they feel the direct threat for the alliance itself. So yeah, we just have when the question is being circulated over and over. So I hope we hope that there will be kind of negotiations as well. As for the artists and grants, so can we imagine a support where we are open to this uncertainty of the opinion, of the artwork, piece of art, how much time does it need? Especially when we talk from the perspective of a grant, it's not what we can support. But in Ukraine, there were such initiatives, and they continue to be in 2022, 2023. There was the Range Room, an entity, did such exhibitions and offering. They wanted to provide the forum for artists, for them to get together. There was no preconditions, no material piece of art, nothing was required, just this forum for following and to get together. So maybe it's a kind of this grooming, as Aleftina mentioned, when they can keep in touch and support one another. Yes, I think this atomization is pretty serious in the artistic communities. And I hope that we can intensify these connections, especially when there is such an open way how you do that, because sometimes people do not know what's waiting ahead of them, but they can support this. They agree to have such support. Yeah, maybe they take risks, maybe there is the question about results and outcomes out of it, but still from the point of view of the civil society, of the common understanding, I think it's one of the key elements and key solutions to find this welfare balance. You mentioned this entity, the Range Room, and I hope that it was the project where people could share their experience. I mean, those who fled Ukraine and those who remained in Ukraine. Could you please dwell upon this, basing on this project? So is it possible to have this stable effect? So is it possible to scale up this to the level of method? I mentioned the early projects of this entity. I'm sorry, Alona, if you see that, why I mentioned Assortimentna Kimnata, the Range Room. But that's very important just for me to mention this. So there is the program Okay, people who are staying in Ukraine, who are abroad and who have these joint projects and works. So right now they have this season, the second season of this program, and some part of these members maybe are taking part in this project for the second time. So yeah, for me it's a very important program. Yeah, in the presentation there was something mentioned about the moderation, but for me it's very important to feel and to hear these thoughts, especially about the possibilities for such communications through the border. Because I saw the text of one of the members of this residency that after a couple of weeks, that his first impression was that it was very, very difficult to start this communication. And in 2025, there is no communication as such. So that's the hurdle they are facing. Maybe there are different personal or some business routes and causes for that. It looks like a lot of grant applications, they are aimed at the foreign participants, and this is highlighted in these applications. So I'm actually not totally agree with this text. Maybe there's some point of discord if you put it like this. Because when it comes to the domestic artist support, as it is put in the text, so yeah, unfortunately it is less tangible. I can tell you about one work. I hope. I feel a bit uncomfortable, and I understand. Yeah, we have here artist solidarity, and I feel a bit uncomfortable about it because, and it's many thanks to Aleftina, because it's becoming more comfortable for me because she can explain it what is happening, but still. Katya Lipkin and Yehor Tsegin, artists who are together working in Rossiyane Zasiyane program. So what they made for the exhibition in 42 building, that's an institution in Lviv on the Rynok Square, 42. So there is a work, an artwork. So it's the house where there is internal court, and one of the window is very, very filthy, with this poultry. Yeah, it's a lot of dirt from the doves, and very often Katya Lipkin, when she visits this, she says, I want to make an art in this space together with Yehor. Yehor sent me Yehor sent something from Vienna, and because it was dirty with the poultry manure from the outside, she decided to also make a kind of artistic work with the poultry manure from the inside. So some poultry manure was sent from Vienna, and right now this window is dirty from both sides. So for me, this work resembles irony. This work resembles what we are witnessing right now, even from politics, etc. So Katya is not protected artist in Ukraine, and her colleague is not protected artist from the outside of Ukraine. He is the worker. He is the worker at the football stadium in the Austrian football club. So basically, he gets rid of this manure in Austria where she works. So that was a kind of joint work. So how I interpret this work, that's the possibility to see. We have the window. We can look through the window, and yes, window to the Europe, right? Yes, Ukraine is Europe. Anyway, we are in Europe. So if you want just to clean this window, sometimes it's very difficult because you can clean from the inside, but it's not sufficient just to clean it from inside. Yes, you need to clean it from the outside as well. So it's this link is very important for me. I'm not sure how directly it is connected with this residency, but right now, Katya and Ihor, they are there and they have this thought within this residency, even though this art is not, this example was not from that, but still it would be good if they were present here just to listen this example I wanted to share. Thank you for this example. Thank you for this case. And continuing the topic of the differences of experiences, Ola, we had a talk with you already that it's not, just to understand somebody, it's not necessary to live the same experience. No, it's very important just to listen to the person, because we are living in the segregated society in this way or another, especially to those who are here, who stay, who left, who are fighting and who are not, who are at the front, who are at the rear. So what do you think? Are we able to try to find the solidarity, not only with those who are present here in person in this room, but also for those who are fighting at the battlefield or who are staying abroad and cannot join these common efforts? So how we can make the solidarity with those people, how we connect these gaps with those who are maybe separated or maybe not interested in being included? So how to do that? So, and do we remain as a community, or is just some separate group of people who are talking about some topical issues? Yeah, I like this conversation, and we are looking around and talking about such big abstract topic. I talk about data all the time, and digits, but it's very, very interesting experience for me, because I think that when we talk about this separation, being split apart, it's all about how we have it in mind. Some people are abroad, someone is fighting, someone is here, someone left. In fact, there is no obstacle for us to continue communication, to continue cooperation or empathy. So we only have these barriers in our heads. When we talk about the experience, yes, I'm sure that in 2022, after the full-fledged invasion, when we felt the greatest threat, people managed to trust one another. They even trust the stranger who is next to you, people with arms, those who can give the shelter. So they were strangers, but they were giving their helping hand. So it's very important to let this distrust go, and then the solidarity appears. So with time, we come back to the understanding that there can be some other context or maybe intention. And so did we give any right to some people who are abroad to voice our interests, to speak on behalf of Ukrainians? I mean, to those people who are not in Ukraine for 3 years. I was for 2 years in France, for example, in Paris. I represented Ukrainian artists, and I didn't have this feeling whether I am entitled to speak on behalf of Ukrainian artists when I live in Paris. So I think that it's all about daily trust. We need to practice it daily. Of course, you can have some traumas now and then. Someone can betray you. Someone can let you down. Someone maybe use you. But again, we have to practice this trauma like yoga every day. So it just takes time, and you will get the hang of it. So in this way, we would have the solidarity in a kind of natural manner. It will become second nature. So we are understaffed. We need people. We understand that this area, the cultural area right now, lost 30% of their human resources. And with the war ongoing, we're going to lose even more people. Yeah, we will not cope with that. We will not, even if we use all the grants and possibilities, we will not be able to implement the preservation of the cultural legacy and develop our own culture. We need to trust, we need to delegate, we need to accept the sorries of somebody else. We need to forgive. We have the right to make mistakes, but we have to practice trust. We do not have Katya Botanova with us, but previously we had a talk with her, and we have good thoughts together. I wanted to voice them out. These ideas were about, is it important for the artist to be present in Ukraine to continue his or her works? I would like you to comment then. And Katya thinks that it is important to avoid stigmatization.
And of course, it creates a kind of dangerous dynamics. And secondly, we have to understand what is presence, whether it's physical presence or intellectual presence. We talked about the difference in experiences, which is a value and important, and those who are staying in Ukraine and those who are abroad. She talked about her own experience and about the fact that she keeps staying outside. She has a more a wider perspective. She's not involved in certain processes, but from the side, it looks that we are doing a great job. And from the inside, we might be dissatisfied and tired with something, and it's difficult to go on in such difficult environment. But from the outside, the dynamics is positive, and we have achieved a lot in these 3 years. And this difference of experiences, this is something that reinforces us. Those who went abroad got better education, maybe can be exhibited in at famous exhibitions and so on. So it's not only about some losses, but also about some achievements. So I would like to ask you whether there is any benefit from these different experiences, whether institutional or any other benefit or emotional. It's difficult to say. If you talk about those who are staying and those who have left, I can see Olha Honchar here, and I remember the workshop, and we defined one more category. These are those people who are in between, actually, here and there. And I think that I belong to such a group of people. I can stay abroad for a month, and then I can come back for a month. And what Ola mentioned about practicing trust, we can practice trust only if there is honesty present. And generally, unfortunately, before the invasion, we didn't learn how to communicate in a positive way. And it's too late to learn because we are already stressed, and this is something that hampers us. So I don't know what's the benefit here. What I mean when I talk about honesty, Oleksandr Mykhed was supposed to be present here. Maybe you are going to quote him. I was present at his artistic talk, and he was a moderator of Yevgeny Korshunov in Kyiv, and they talked about the topic of honesty, but in fact, maybe it was more about the impossibility to talk honestly about anything. What do I mean? It's about differences of experiences. I would talk also about the differences in choices when it comes to artists. Men and women artists, because it looks like women have the choice, and when it comes to men artists, they don't have this choice, or it's quite limited. Although this choice, if to be honest, it was there, as Yevhen Korshunov mentioned, because on the one hand, one woman artist is showing how the cloud is coming to a person and taking it to a bus, to a vehicle, and this person looks non-objective. We have 200,000 people going to the conscription offices, and those who are fighting, they are doing their own weapons. So even the way this person is depicted like as an object, not the subject, this is something about our country. So we have 200,000 people serving.
So 200,000 people. First, they were mobilized to army. Then they understood they cannot be there. They left the army. And then there was a law that people could come back to army without being criminalized. Далі українською. Тобто він говорить.
Now back to Ukrainian. So it looks like there were no choices, but still this choice was present. Maybe Sapolsky can argue with that. But what I mean by this, so there's difference in experiences, differences in choices, the lack of honesty or the lack of understanding of the general situation that we are in. And what I would like to highlight here, it's not over yet. It looks like those who left, maybe they will come back. Maybe as an artist, a woman artist, I'm not able to talk about male issues because I don't have a drunkard in my family. This was mentioned by someone. For me personally, it's not over yet. I don't know where I will end up staying. And those people who write me messages like this, I always say my choice whether I will be mobilized or not. I have this choice as a woman. I will not be discussing it with those who are not in the army, but only with those artists who are fighting now. So what I would like to indicate from here, this is not over yet. And regardless, what is important for us to keep in mind, we are, first of all, can change. Secondly, we can change our stance and we can act the way we didn't act yesterday. And this is a kind of corridor towards the thought that we don't know what is going to happen, and this person's actions can still be corrected, rectified. That's why a thought about such a person can be changed. So we should provide a space for each of us as a community. Then, well, let's have a look. So we have been mentioning this range room many times. I will also mention it. We have less Ukrainians. We are being killed. That's why maybe it's important to put everything on hold and start forgiving the Ukrainians, not to forgive Russians, but to forgive Ukrainians. Thank you, Olha. This is something you mentioned. We have to be even more tolerant and loyal to our citizens and to be even more cruel to the outsiders, to enemies. I would like to continue this topic with the difference of experiences. Borys mentioned that there is a dialogue inside the community representatives or institutions, but there is no feeling that this dialogue is taking place or it's complicated. And you shared your experience of cooperation with the museums near the front line, and you said it was quite complicated, but you managed to arrive at an effective dialogue. On the one hand, it can be something that cannot be scaled up, but anyway, in each case, we need to look for solutions. So could you please elaborate on which challenges you faced and what solutions you applied? So you are the member of that coalition and some other colleagues. We have a number of tracks On the one hand, we want to support activists in institutions, in their professions, to express solidarity, provide practical assistance. And we have another sphere of activity, a track. This is evacuation track, as we call it. It started when the new Minister of Culture took an office, and I received access to information how evacuation takes place, and we realized that after 2022, in 23 or 24, there were no evacuations from the frontline museums. I'm sure that a lot of you could see this information because we made it public. These are millions of things, of objects that are located at the front line in museums. And on the one hand, we started to pressurize state authorities, so this process gets regulated. So there will be some accountable people because we knew there would be an attack coming and there is a threat of losing the state museum fund, which is the property of the entire nation. So we have different methods that we act. We pressurize the state authorities, we become public, and we try to talk with the directors of museums who, according to the law, will be criminally responsible for a collection, for example, as a result of neglect. And you know how we can juggle around with these notions. The state is doing it very successfully when the state makes the last person responsible. And the president mentioned that there was an attack expected in Kharkiv region and Sumy region. And in the south of Ukraine, we asked for a Zoom meeting with the directors in Sumy. We mentioned about activities and we told them we want your collections to be evacuated. We would like to know about your needs. That was a very complicated dialogue. There were a few motives of why people didn't want to evacuate. We thought that they were just criminals who didn't want to evacuate the heritage, but people were actually scared that the collection would be taken away from them, stolen, and will be moved to another museum. And they were afraid that they would lose their jobs because they thought that if the museum is not operational, they would be downsized. And there are also local authorities who stated everything is working, so the museum has to work. But apart from that, we suddenly realized that museum workers and these cultural institutions, librarians, and so on, these are people who work all the time, even beyond the war, and get very low salaries. This is a bit more than 6,000 of hryvnias in a small town, let's say. But meanwhile, they are staying with this profession. And we can say that, well, this is the only thing that they can do. This is their mission. But on the other hand, this is my personal, very subjective opinion, but I'm ready to express it. I want to be honest. I feel that it's like a kind of Stockholm syndrome. People are not ready to change anything. And this temporary ownership of the state fund which belongs to Ukraine and taking this final decision whether to evacuate collection, let someone in or not, this is the only mechanism of feeling your own importance. This is the response of the humiliated people who are underestimated, who are not considered to be important by the state and other institutions. So if I make this decision whether I keep this thing or evacuate it, this is actually was a very painful conversation, as a result of which there were a lot of museum people involved in this discussion. And there were some other workers beyond museum activities. I have a special education, and I've never worked in the museum. But our colleagues heard that you are not museum employees, you shouldn't be involved in this. That's what the response that we received. So as a result, I felt this distrust. I felt this distrust even at the level of accepting support. They were distrustful of our readiness to help. They thought maybe we were somehow politically involved, or maybe they thought we were involved in having some our hidden agendas. Maybe they thought that they were suspecting us of having some benefits, like applying for grants and so on. So this is the result of genocide policy against the Ukrainian culture, which is a bit helpless and which has cultivated this aggressive distrust. This is something that nobody can work from outside. This is something that has to be tackled from inside. This is our tragic trauma that we are experiencing. And apart from all these challenges that we've discussed, this is something for us, an additional assignment that we have to cope with. But you have come up with a decision, right? Katya, I would like to say an optimistic answer. No, we didn't manage to convince all the museum employees. We are still building up our dialogue. We are talking now with Lavra and Sofia in Kyiv. We don't want to fire the director, but it's all an evolution, a process, which is a complicated process. It was easier for us to push the state authorities to start evacuation. It's easy because you are getting public, you go to media, and you have a result. So every 2 weeks, the Ministry of Culture, they report to the president how evacuation is taking place. But when it comes to individuals, to the heads of communities, it's much more complicated because we don't have trust with them. Nobody talked with them throughout all these years. So we talk about relationship. We need to build relationship with time. It's not only that we need to address them when we have a need. We have to keep up this relationship when we don't have particular interest. The last thing that I would like to mention, when we had forums, maybe you remember it, Galicia cult, Sloboda cult, and so on. At that time, we thought these were terrible times, but in fact, these were great times. And we were trying to build those bridges. And in 2022, on the 24th of February, it worked out really well. All chats were activated from all cults. And I could see people sharing the opportunities for housing and so on. I thought, well, what are we doing with these forums? These are very abstract things. But then, when it worked out, I could see the particular KPI about the effectiveness of this communication. We were thinking, what is our impact in all of this? And my colleague was saying, well, we develop networks. For me, networks, it's about cables, like physical cables. But actually, relationship is about this network. So we are basically creating these small connections, networks within the community of cultural. So very high quality fabric network is very important. So this worked out when I moved abroad. And I addressed a lot of activists in different regions. And another comment about honesty, and I will pass on the floor to Borys. We did a number of events in France, and one of them was among the cultural activists. We were trying to establish connections with the French counterparts. They had some meetings and there were some benefits. We had some museum employers coming, and there was an exhibition in Louvre. But there was one initiative which didn't happen. We wanted to have a meeting with the curator of the modern art. And the range of curators that were invited to this event, at a certain moment, I learned that in order for this event to happen in France, our lawyer was a guy, an art studies representative, but he had a Russian passport.
He was really pro-Ukrainian. But when I heard this fact, I just understood that I have to voice this out to the participants. It was back in 2022 or 23, and I had this understanding. And he said, like, yeah, there is a danger. Yeah, I know. I learned this news, and there is a danger hiding there. So he says, I can be out. But she says, I have to say that. I said to all the potential participants of this event that, look, we have such a person. We had a long conversation with Borys, with Ksenia Malik, and they say we cannot accept this person with a Russian passport. It was very difficult dialogue. I really wanted to make it. We had dispute on that, and I sided with them. I understood why, and my French colleagues eventually also had to do that. So I have never been offered, and I have never faced in France or any other place that I can be in the same panel with such people. I cannot say it is right or not. Just for me, it was a very important experience because, being honest, it was important both for me and it is important for my colleagues. And thanks very much to Borys, because I was pushing for it. But Borys really provided a lot of argument why it is not possible. Yeah, it's a painful way to building up trust. Borys, if you can make some reflection on that point, I would be thankful. To be earnest, I really wanted to avoid a conversation about cooperation with Russians. But if you touch this point, okay. So recently we had a conversation on this stage. It was the decolonization of art. The book was presented here, which Tatiana Filevska was doing, and the team of Visibility Publishing House here. So we discussed this book here, and I really wanted to ask the question to Daria Badior. Yes, we delivered our thoughts. That I, for example, really am amazed that in the cinema community, these lines, it doesn't work this way. So if there is the cinema festival, yes, Ukrainian directors take part in that festivals where, of course, I'm not gonna voice the names of the authors of the movies, but still they are Russian. So I think this is a more complex but productive strategy. It's not just about the fact of the collective representation. Yes, this, to my mind, this fact doesn't work. But if this is a kind of more deep and complex interaction where a separate personalia can talk about themselves, so maybe this is something that we can reach upon one day, or not. I'm thinking about it. So you were mentioning that cinema speaks for itself. So to your mind, is it the same with the art? So if we are on the same form, we and Russians, so will we be able somehow? Yeah, it's very important, and I maybe really wanted to voice it from this stage, that this form for conversations, for the dialogue, the forum where some earnesty, understanding, mutual understanding, trust, or some other things are possible. I'm not sure that it will be easy, that it will not take any efforts, only by means of intellectual, ethical efforts, we will get to the state of affairs how it was in 2022. In terms of relationships, unconditional solidarity or other things. So it doesn't work this way. That's what I think. The context, the difficulties, it's absolutely different time and space dimension. Yeah, it can be repeated. Yeah, it can be. Or it will be just the individual divisions of a separate personality, where these timelines and time and space dimensions will be shifted and this solidarity will be possible. So, to say that we can achieve it by collective efforts, no, it's impossible because there is accumulation of misunderstandings, insufficient discussion of certain things. It's really cool that it's possible for us to discuss it here right now. Because 1 year ago, I couldn't come up with such ideas. It's also by the efforts of separate people who are pushing this through. And actually, they allowed us to be part of such conversations and of these difficult discussions. What is also important for me is that very often we appeal to 2022 because that was the game-changing year and a lot of irreversible processes were started there, especially with regard to the collective digestion of what we witnessed back then. But also, I think about our reflections about this retrospective to 2022. At some point, they were just stopped. So when we talk about 2023, 24, during these years, we just have some sporadic memories, as Sapolsky mentioned. So yeah, if we can add some more efforts, we could have more detailed timeline of this period. But still, I am just trying to speculate as my humble opinion coming out from the communication with certain people. So a lot of personal tragedies happened during this time. Me personally, I remember how I suffered the case when Kakhovka hydropower plant was bombed. My colleague Stas had the exhibition called Days, and that was association with that. We had very open social life, a lot of meetings, and then everything was like muted. We for some period lost contact, and we just carried inside what was difficult for us. We stopped sharing that. We stopped communicating as we used to. So yes, there were some losses, personal losses, massive tragedies, and people really were going through this in an individual fashion. So the question is when we have to start speaking about that, how we have to get this memory from the amazing solidarity, how it can be brought to the ground. So I wanted to mention my colleague Stas here because owing to this person 1 year ago, I started thinking about this more. Stas said that if back then he wanted to start over the communication and started again being in touch with those people whom he stopped communicating with. I mean, those who are in Ukraine, who stay at home, who stay in always, or those who left the country. So he wanted to renew this connection. He just started writing some small messages or some small calls because he understood that he could lose these people for good. So yeah, he had this feeling, and I actually started thinking about this as well. That is important for me. If we have these questions like why we stopped, why we lost contact, and how we can keep in touch again. And last point I want to mention here, sorry for being so long. So there are some indicators which help me see that something new is happening, something weird. So a couple of resources showed up in Ukraine in social media, on an open media platforms where so right now, what is flourishing is the anonymous critical texts. It's a very interesting phenomenon, which indicates that people have a lot of things that have been accumulating for a while, but unfortunately there are some things that limit them, some barriers. They cannot do it in an open way. But they also have an understanding if they keep silent, the things are going just to get worse. So therefore, they come up with a nickname like Hit Machine, Olena Bipchilka, that's like Boulogne citizen. So such nicknames come up, and they start pushing these important texts. Critics, right? Critical remarks. Yes, exactly. And where they have the very deep topics which they bring to the table. Some people reveal their names. We have some suspicions. So there's Theater Boom channel nickname. So I'm just voicing all of these things because I think it's it's an important phenomenon which we have right now, which is very speaking. And we understand that there is possibility to find common grounds to build trust. And it also the skill, to communicate in non-toxic way. That's very important. It's very good for us not to be too toxic, not to bring about like chemical reaction, So these are my observations. Thanks for your attention. Yeah, and that is happening not only in the area of art. You mentioned this anonymity, and I, in turn, came up with some project that we were doing when we were attracting people to the dialect, even some small kids. But instead of them, adults were showing up because they had something to say, something that they cannot put in the social media. No, they keep silence there. So we had thousands of different application forms in different projects, and people also had this possibility to voice what they have in mind. So that was, we didn't want it to put it this way, but that was for us very, we just understood how people feel. They wanted to be heard. I also wanted to ask you about again, the solidarity topic, solidarity with our foreign colleagues. I hope maybe someone from our audience also have the questions. So let's do this round of questions. So what do you think? Are we integrated, actively integrated into the global cultural area as we were represented there from 2022? Everything changed from 2022, so we need to be competitive on equal terms. It's difficult to be competitive on equal terms because we are understaffed, and those who are on board, they still experience fatigue and lack of resources. So within the context of this, Borys, you mentioned that we do not have these scaleful events. And when we talk about interaction, sometimes we are not understood, especially when we talk about the reconstruction, because yes, the reconstruction has to be in place one day, but not now. Right now, we are still up in the air where the war is ongoing. That's the only reality we live in. Of course, we have totally different experience, and we try somehow to find this understanding. So, to your mind, so is there any solidarity between us? Is it possible for us to build our relationship on trust and mutual interest, on equality? Yes, when I was talking about this, what I had in mind was the recent case, the discussion of the new project, where the whole framework of the project was that we need to think about this, how we need to reconstruct and rebuild Ukraine. So I was talking to my colleagues from Belgium, and we started this dialogue because I understand the importance of the perspective for the reconstruction starting from 2022-23. I mean, this perspective has shifted from back then. So people I'm working with, they do not think about the reconstruction the way they used to do it earlier, because we do not see this point of victory, point of when the war is over. I mean, post-war reconstruction. So we are again up in the air. So if it's a starting point, it's difficult to work with without understanding this frame. We are all waiting for some May or June or other months when, when the ex-minister of culture from Russia will come up, say, we give up. Yeah, I will just put it in this way. We are waiting for the war to end. Or we are living within the process, which is really badly foreseen. It's like unforeseeable. We are adaptive enough to another type, another mode of life. And of course, this process is very, very difficult. I do not follow Sapolsky. I listen to my friends quoting him. So I also want to back this word. So memory is one of the key points in art. Art also suffers during the war. So Russians hit what they know, what is painful for us. About solidarity, I do not have any answer to that. When I talk about the scale, what I have in mind is what basically I discussed, the scale of the residencies, where we have 10 people on board and they stay together for 3 weeks. Again, they share their experience, they have the safe space to do that. Also, sometimes they provide critical remarks under the nickname. Also, there are some mechanisms that can lead to the solidarity. They are important. We need to work them out. So I do not believe in solidarity as such, even though I have some part of me of supporting this living inside of me. Whenever we talk about solidarity, we get outside our personal box. But when we talk about mechanisms, that's the forms of work and the forms of support. I wanted to make a joke that I'm right now here because the last 2 grants I applied for, I failed. And starting from the day before yesterday, I started implementing the project, even though I do not have financing for them. So I have this psychological refresh. And right now I work with no grants, with no money from that, but I really would like to apply for another one. Thank you very much, Borys. Within this context, Alevtina, I wanted to go back to you. So some artists, maybe like 2/3 from the all, from those who were taking part in my survey. So they were mentioning about the stable programs for financial support, not only grants, but our artists really work without some financial backing. So Alevtina, you said you do not have problems with financing. How do you manage to work in a structural way, even though artists, the majority of authors do not have such systemic support? But if you build up a project which does not have some measurable result, which can be stable, so how to do this? Alevtina, maybe you can share your experience. Maybe there are some alternative financing resources to finance artistic work and practice. Any support. So for the artists, what can you tell about us? What can you tell us about? So I will continue what Ola mentioned. It's very important to put here this separation artists. Those who are from the Union of Artists, or maybe those who were working with us side by side for a long while. Workers from the poor museums. Basically, I also visited the stone Baba sculpture. It was in the gray zone, very close to the war zone. I showed that. I visited facilities that were close to the combat zone. So, what I would like to mention, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher in all the programs for the Ukrainian artists. I do it pro bono or not pro bono. Yeah, there were some residencies in Muzici, in other places where young Ukrainian artists had the chance to do something with no aiming to measure the results. What would be my advice?
This is my immediate advice to you. Please, being an artist, this is a privilege in Ukraine. Be happy that you are allowing this thought that you are an artist in a war-torn Ukraine. If you haven't had enough time to be educated, it's a pity. You have to know several languages. You have to be able to report financially. Well, we have a lot of opportunities to report easily as a private entrepreneur. For example, when I am abroad and when I say that it's easily for me to report on my private entrepreneur activities, it's extremely easy. Maybe you don't like a private bank, but maybe some other banks are different, but it's very easy to report financially on your activities. Those who mentioned it, maybe they lost the ability to learn because of the war, or maybe they didn't have 500 hryvnias to pay their own accountant. I'm doing it myself, for example. So my advice is, yeah, you try to find the resources. You can have some rest and then try to learn. So language, I mean the English language, it's a must. You have to find a person who will instruct you, and you have to remember that it's your privilege that you are still an artist in Ukraine. That's the way I will put it. Maybe you will not like it, but believe me, I have never had as many funds as never before as I do now. And another example of solidarity, Margarita Polovinko got over 1,000,000 hryvnias that we raised and donated. So there were some colleagues involved. They did it fantastically quickly, and I was in a Zoom and reporting about it financially, how it was beautifully made. And unfortunately, to my shame, I didn't know the artist who was the author of the picture that I bought. I demonstrated it to her that I bought his picture. I didn't know what he was doing, but just bought his work. And referring to the comments by Roman Mikhailov, he mentioned there is a gap, age gap, and this artist is 20 something. So in 3 years, I felt that I have never been cool like them at their age. The last question, Ola, that I would like to ask, it's about this sustainability, something that we did in 2022, 2023. We had enough energy to have one project or one event, and prior to that, we hadn't had so many initiatives that were repeated, because usually people started doing something and we had a revolution, the war, and then again the war, and then COVID in between, and economic crises. So we had a lot of good beginnings, but very few continuations. And Borys also mentioned that one of the ways to build sustainability, this is to join sustainable joins, like for example the Venice Biennale, to participate in systematic projects. But maybe there's something else. Do we have any alternatives? Can we build sustainable systems in the conditions of uncertainty? This is the topic, very political topic, actually. Well, but you're doing some politics, right? Coming back to the beginning of our conversation, I we don't have sustainability. We have to forgive it. If there were single-time projects that didn't become projects for years, it's acceptable. It's okay. We have to forgive ourselves. Sometimes when you engage in a conversation, you can hear people asking, what would be the practical benefit of our conversation? If there is no practical benefit, I'm out of here. On the one hand, yes, we have to preserve our energy and efforts, but on the other hand, there should be such improvisation when we are planting something, but there should be weed in between. Maybe some plants will die, but there will be some plants germinating, something that will become stronger later on. But what do we need when it comes to sustainability of culture? We just need working institutions, and this is not the result of the war. Unfortunately, we have been tolerating the fact that we had a Soviet Union system of cultural policy. We have certain associations. We have a special budget line funding associations in the state budget. So there is a budget line for the old academy, which is considered to be prestigious. I've been annoyed with this actually, because in France, the Academy of Art, they are very well to do and they are very popular and demanded, and they donate money to support artists. And in our case, there is a special budget line that every year 30 academicians and 50 members will get $100 and the members $70. And these are the artists at the national level. And these are our very well respected friends. Of course, you can open the site and check this. So I have a kind of mental misunderstanding. In our Ministry of Culture, we have an event agency that is organizing events for state. So there are actually two people that are responsible for the museum evacuation and digitalization. And each time when we have the budget approved, the same budget lines are preserved. In the state institutions, there are only two types of expenses. These are just salaries and utilities. Nothing is kept for development. And we are tolerating such situation. Because if we say that this is so terrible, but then when I encourage people to join in and change something, people say, well, I'm so creative, I don't want to deal with it. Let somebody else deal with it. But that's what this has been happening. This system has been changed for 30 years. Nobody will help us from outside if we, we have to do it ourselves. If we don't want to change it, then we have to be in good terms with this trend. We might lose the part of our country, nation. So bad plan is also a plan, yeah? And when coming back with the Rispol project, we provided pieces of advice to develop policies for the Ministry of Culture. This is an important document. It was a strategy. Have you been acquainted with that? Did you manage to get to the objectives and tasks? And each sphere of culture, contemporary, museums, cinema, and so on, everything was indicated and what state has to do in each of the spheres and what they can do. And in order for these documents to be formulated, the state even learned how to play the democracy when they launched this strategy. They started discussions, collecting different recommendations. When the strategy was being presented, There were some broadcasts at the TV channels, and people were saying, wow, this is such a terrible thing. Who were those bastards who were preparing it? That was me. And the group of experts that were working together with me and Olena Karavai and Olha Sahaidak, who worked at the art component and some other creative industries, this is what we have did. So the cultural heritage included what the 90% of what we worked conceptually, but what the state can actually implement is only a small portion of everything. To change these educational institutions, to change the system of funding and management, we included it as a reform in the nearest 2 years. There are only tasks like to discuss the concept and so on. Because if you want reforms, we need funds. But everything depends on us. We can at least get acquainted with the strategy. We can find the field that is affiliated with us. We have to be proactive and initiative. And if we don't manage, we have to be tolerant and forgiving to ourselves. And we have to wait for our victory that will be achieved with the help of our artists that are at the front line today. So, dear friends, are there any questions or comments? Maybe you would like to share your experience. Thank you so much. I also participated in the survey by Kateryna, and there was an interesting question: what inspires you, whether the meetings abroad or the meetings in Ukraine? And I am convinced that all our Zooms and meetings are real source of inspiration, but when they take place at home. You partially started to talk about the recovery topic. I would like to share my experience and the project that I'm involved in. I have an NGO, New Museum, and they are involved in recovery of Roman Shokhevich Museum that was destroyed on the 1st of January 2023, and we have two museums in Lviv that were especially targeted by Russians, and there were different materials being made public about the planning to put fire on Stepan Bandera Museum and other intelligence also reported things that some other institutions were at risk. And when the Russians come to the occupied territories, the first thing they ask is, where are the museums? For me personally, when I was invited to this project, I thought it was a bit crazy, because how can we renovate museums when the war is still ongoing? Because obviously nobody is protected in none of the regions of Ukraine, and the missiles can target any place, and we need defense, air defense. So we were joking that we need to donate for the air defense near the museum and then renovate the museum. But during this time that I've been in the project, we decided that it has to be like all people, the principle of involving all people. There will be no single donor. And at this point, this is a story of a solidarity for me, because everything started with the workers of communal institutions that were offered to donate. There were also some other range of cultural events by museum workers and so on. All the tickets, there were tickets sold out for recovery, or there were some excursions behind the scenes in theaters, or also Jam Factory was involved. You can see some posters involving Jam Factory about the donations. And this Sunday there will be a football match, and the funds from tickets, they will be transferred to museum for museum renovation. And even there was a category of people that I would never think would support the museum. But my point is, we maybe don't have time to wait until the invasion is over to renovate this museum, and it's important to start renovating it right now. It's understandable that the security situation in our region, in Lviv, is a bit different from the rest of Ukraine, and we have more chance of renovating it successfully than other museums. But I'm inspired by the fact that we are the pioneers in this process, and when we achieve it, complete it, we will be able to start renovating museums in other regions. If somebody told me that I would deal with it in 2025, I would say no, we will not do anything when it comes to renovation by this new reality that we are living now, not only in Ukraine, but all over the world. It pressurizes into reflect quickly, change our decisions. And maybe there will be no safety like in the past before, but we still need museums anyway. But once again, I'm thinking that having museum in your city, it's a kind of privilege. It's a privilege of peaceful times when we are abroad and when we meet for a conference, and you can see these huge museums, collections, coffee shops, souvenir shops, guidebooks for the children and adults. They have HR teams where there are 20 people working, so many. And then you come back to Ukraine and you start thinking, well, what can we learn from this? Because we have a different reality, because we don't have this privilege of a peaceful time. But on the other hand, I think that the experience that we are having now, how to do activities during the war, how to renovate museums, this experience will become topical not only for the European countries, but for the rest of the world. That's why I conclude that there will be no complete safety in the future, but museums have to live longer than we do. And in 100 years, there will be no us, but the museums have to continue working. Thank you. Would you like to comment on this topic? No, no comments. I agree with everything. I have another question that I wanted to ask. It seems when we gathered about a year and a half ago in Lviv, so we had a lot of discussions and we talked about how to deal with those who are like non-nomads but actually settled somewhere in a certain location, whether we have to take their opinion into account. These discussions were a bit strange to me, but I now have a feeling that they have disappeared, these discussions. It's not a painful issue anymore. But I have another question, taking into account that we have artist solidarity topic here. So what is your attitude to those who are neutral, who are ignoring the war at all among the artists, who do not reflect it in their art, or maybe they use art as an entertainment medium, or in their art practices can even support some controversial groups. I will not mention any particular artists, but for example, like supporting the Moscow Patriarchate and so on, something that we see as unacceptable, but still there are certain artists working in those spheres. And does it make sense? Actually, maybe we should have someone shaking us, and we will continue to move, leaving anything inadequate behind. Do you have any ideas regarding this? So you asked Katya what would be the advice. So there is a memory issue, and these cases, in order not to forget, you are aware that I have a methodology of building archives, and I will tell you that I am collecting these materials in folders because the memory is getting worse. And it's not about those who are distancing themselves from the war, but those who are actually damaging Ukraine, my community. I collect these materials and put them into folders, but right now we don't have any ideas, any thoughts, nor space about how to do with the Reputation Institute. I don't have the answer to this, but I only have folders in my computer. So this is my question. Oh, this is my answer.
Just a couple of words from my end. Yeah, there is a very complicated limit where extreme art becomes extremism, where ideas, creative ideas, become destructive ideas. For all that, it's important to understand the split of the powers. So yeah, we are different. We have our own struggle for the liberal and democratic values, for the possibility of the freedom of speech. And we, because of the war, are required to be self-censored. Or we maybe require some other assessment whether something is possible or not. So there is a risk and danger to eventually have the mono voice. And therefore, when we are, for example, abroad and have a talk with our colleagues, sometimes they think that we are radical because of the trauma. On the other hand, yes, we provide some signals, some dangerous signals that we can be radical, and we're gonna tell you what you can say and what you can't say. And coming back to the trust and delegation, it seems to me that in reality it is possible to anticipate that these artistic manifestations can be pretty radical, not comfortable. They can seem not patriotic enough, but it's still about democratic values. And therefore, if we had a chance to discuss such phenomena with the subject matter experts present, I'm not talking about some aggressive public, no, about the artist, historian of arts, curators, critics, we miss these links to have this professional scanning where a person can assess that this art is complete for the formal point of view, but in a nutshell. So what I want to single out is that if we talk about censorship, tracking, I think it's up to the security service of Ukraine. And it's good that within the artistic environment, cultural environment, we still have this democratic and liberal principle perceived. One addition from my side, you mentioned historians of art. I would like to get to where we started with infantility, lack of education, and unfortunately, under education in the legal realm, political history. So that's the gap, that's the blind spot. Yeah, it looks like it's censorship, but that's because of the lack of the knowledge. Yeah, our legislation of Ukraine, we have Constitution of Ukraine. So, and again, to differentiate, it's not about self-censorship, about censorship, but it's just because of the lack of lawyer, which could untangle everything. And we could be better off in this way. And my last remark here about what was Stas mentioned. Yes, I also break the ice with those whom I lost contact with. I write some short messages to them whenever I feel something that I want to say something. Yeah, and therefore sometimes I do this. And what I received, this person on the other end said a lot about discrimination, about Ukrainian practices. What I replied to this person, like, let's maybe take Ukraine to the court, to the International European Court on Human Rights, and maybe we will win. We can lose in Ukrainian court, but maybe we can win in the European one. So yeah, that's about the fact that unfortunately we're not capable of providing strategic vision. Maybe we do not have the proper activity. Maybe we do not build the academy which could teach how to be well-educated artists. Sometimes they consider our artists to be numb and deaf and just about diploma, etc. So they do not voice their ideas. They are just standing in the corridors. That's just an idea. So if people are numb in Ukraine, how they can speak abroad when they do not speak English. So I think that we cannot do a lot of things. That's the way that we have to learn ourselves. For example, Russians told me, like, look, you did this in the wrong way. Thank you very much for this. Now we are doing better. Of course, if you cannot do some things because you were colonized, it's obvious. Yeah, no reason for that. But right now we show them how we can do that. How we can forgive ourselves, right? For example, yes, I remember that there was once a discussion about why you are so late with decolonization. Why haven't you done it earlier? Maybe we needed to do decolonization like 400 years ago when we were actually occupied. Yeah. Of course, we need to remember that we are a young country, we are a young community. And especially our community 30 years ago was not artistic community as such. It was all about the Soviet Union. Yeah, it's such a sad note you finished. All right, so what makes us stand out from the other colonized communities? It's our humor. We're going to talk tomorrow about the participation in the Malta Biennale of the Ukrainian participants. Yes, we watched those who came there with the decolonized projects, and I would like to say that yes, humor was our thing. This is something which makes us standing out, and therefore that's my positive note. All right, yeah, let's do grooming together. Let's hug. Okay, we're gonna have the break and we're gonna do that. Thank you very much. If now question, we have one more question here. All right. A small remark. A lot has been said about, could you please introduce yourself? I'm an artist, Maria Vasilenko. Today, it was a lot of, I'm under 25 artist, and we were talking about the Rossiene project. So I am taking part in the second round of this program. I think that this is...
Без певної, можна сказати, цілі. І, якщо якісь технічні моменти, також отримання коштів на роботу доволі полегшено. Це мабуть, саме той формат, який хотілося бачити, і формат діалогу, в якому можна і грумінгом одне одному займатися, і йти в конфлікт. Доволі безпечно.
It's also about the way how we can do grooming, and this what we miss. So I feel this separation, I feel these gaps in the super mini communities, and maybe even inside of the bigger one. We sometimes lack connection. I'm really thinking about that we can have a bunch of such gaps, but we need to bridge those gaps. I understand that this program, it's a great privilege for those people. For me, it's a great privilege to stay here, to sit here, to be able to speak. And when we try to to connect these gaps, to solve the problems inside of us. I think that other communities, they are scaling up really fast. But right now, but still we have to deal with ourselves. First of all, okay, we need to learn how to forgive. And this program really taught me a lot. Because Russian is a C in the program. Yes, we sow something is coming from the ground, then we harvest it. So in Ukraine we have this program, and it is actually called Spilled and Scattered. Spilled and Scattered, yes. And I hope that Dasha Chechushkova, she does these small bombs that are flourishing. It's the space where dialogue is possible, where reinteraction is possible. And thank you for this space. Thank you very much for this comment. Is there anyone who would like to say some words? Yes, there are. Good afternoon, everyone. Daria Prodobailo. I'm very happy to see you all. We keep a close eye on everyone in social media, but it is a great pleasure to see my friends and colleagues in person. Yes, and I also think about grooming. Thank you for the organizing such a fantastic event. Simon, thanks. It's a great feeling, to feel the sustainability of such events happening every year on end. So we try to get deep into this progress, and we are looking for and see the results. So my remark, I am considered to be a person who is nomadic. So for 3 months I'm in Ukraine, then I'm in Berlin for the majority of times, and I received education in Berlin even before the full-fledged war. I decided to get back to Ukraine. So for me it was very important from the very beginning to stay connected, to give some support, to have the understanding what is happening. I'm a curator, and I felt that I need to have this first-hand touch. I was looking for this depth, and one of the projects that I had last year, I visited residencies by Dasha Kuzmich. That was the private initiative which sometimes covers the state needs. So you are missing here. This is the name of the residency. So it looks like people are missing you. It means you are missing something because you're not here. So I had 2 questions in my mind. First of all, I was asking, how do you feel? How do you feel these gaps? What is the impact of that? And also the program, Россия не засіяна, the scattered communities appeared. So we felt this need, which was pressing. And the second question was, if I'm abroad, is there any place for me here? Does somebody miss me here? And I received answer, yes, you have your niche, occupy that. So it's your responsibility. You have to occupy, you have to claim it yours. So Olha visualized in a great manner these gaps which people fail to take. So people who left the country, no one can take their place. This place will remain open because we do not see these people on the street. The new generation is raising up. So we need to have 2 strategies in this way. First of all, we need to be more pragmatic and more adult on the level of state institutions. Because it's all about people who are working here in Ukraine and abroad. It's our human capital, it's our value. We need to learn how to unite our capital, how to build up our interaction. I will tell it from my experience, yeah, especially the support we received during the first and second year of the war. Yes, it continues, but still they wait some, I mean, those, our friends, our allies, they wait some strong ideas coming from our end. So therefore, yeah, we need to take care of ourselves. It's all about grooming, yeah, and we need to take care about one another. So I opened the door of my house. I created, I have a flat on Auguststrasse in Germany. It's a legendary street. So I decided that we need to have this accommodation. We need the space. We do not have Ukrainian house in Berlin, unfortunately. So therefore, it was important for me to offer something, not just to have my own space, not to be guest or curator in German institutions, no, but to have something own, some space where I can invite my colleagues, other artists, Ukrainian and foreign. So I wanted to make my house, my flat, to be the hub. I make a joke, it's a residency in one of my rooms. So sometimes people, yeah, really come, couch surf in my hub. All right, so has a nourishing function. And I think it's a good practice to have such institutions, to have space where we could gather. It's very important, and this is something we need to point our attention to. We need such physical spaces. And one more thing about the experience, how we need to exchange, how we need to... Yeah, Ola mentioned that. Museum, the reconstruction of museums, this experience really would be topical in future, but also we can learn from the colleagues from Syria, for example. Right now they have very big project. That was Aleppo reconstruction. So yeah, we need to borrow such practices and to see what's effective or not. So it's about being active, it's about being open and included in the global community. Therefore, thank you for the floor, and it's all about support, of course. For me, it's very important sometimes just to turn to somebody, just to talk over or to ask for help. So that's what I started to do starting from 2025. I finally started fulfilling my weakness, yeah, to ask for help. Thank you for your comment. Any other comments or remarks or suggestions? All right, if none, we're gonna finish this part. Thank you very much. Thank you for our colleagues. Thank you for this panel. One technical issue from my end. So we're gonna have lunch over there in the cafeteria. Then we have Nova 1 hall down the corridor. We have on repeat. We have movies, so we have the Let the Body Speak movie there. They are on repeat, so you can just join and watch. So, or you can take some food from the cafe and then go to watch the movie. And also want to mention that we have exhibition. Bojana reminded me of free access. Please, we have exhibition. You have the ArtsLink Assembly participant password, just say that and you can join it. Tomorrow we're going to have the curator tour excursion, but if you want, you can watch what is being exhibited right now, or even tomorrow in the morning if you have other plans tomorrow. So enjoy your food.